just how essential were community and commutation to the pursuit of American independence. In this video, I'll share my thoughts on it, as well as what I believe that it means for us today. Hey my friend, I'm Jonah, and welcome to Lionsway Media. So, just before we get started, there are two disclaimers I want to make, in that there are probably these two biases in play here. The first is that there's been this continual drumbeat of community in the back of my mind. And when that's going on, we tend to pick up on things more than we normally would. And the second, just on the first point, it's sometimes good that we see those patterns, but other times it's like we're actually seeing a pattern that's not there. So it's sort of a balance there. But the second is that since I've been reading this biography for Samuel Adams, there's this focus on what he did, so that may skew some things on about how I approach this. But then, I think there's something we can learn from what Samuel Adams did and was doing, and apply it to how we pursue our goals and dreams today. Because the first thing is that he wasn't really what most people at the time would consider to be successful, at least in terms of regular life and business and so forth. Because while he was educated to a certain extent, he was basically pretty much penniless, and he was a poor tax collector, as in he was probably the one who actually didn't retire the most taxes that he was supposed to collect, or didn't collect them as much as he could have. But he also wrote a lot of articles and represented the people of his town, Boston. But through it all, he displayed this influence that few, if anyone else in his time had. And reading over his life, I think there are two reasons for this. In that he fostered community and also communicated with people. And Samuel Adams was known in his birthplace of Boston. And because he spent time with the people there, they saw him walking down the streets when he worked for his father. They read his articles in the paper and all that. And he was one of their representatives in government. And in addition, he communicated with people, writing articles and letters, and this gave him influence over what the people talked about and also what they knew. And part of this is the fact that, almost over a decade before, the war started and the Declaration of Independence was signed, he was talking about the concepts of rights and liberties to the people in his articles and kind of informing them on certain things. And that's why it became common for the average person to talk about them and the philosophers that stated these things. Because, again, he kept these people informed. And even more than that, he encouraged the formation of committees outside of the colonial governments so that the colonies to know what was going on in each other rather than relying on Britain and so forth. And even while all this was going on, and he had this dream of independence that was building inside of him, he kept his personal ambitions in check in a way. And I think this is partially because he understood the political game. Because while he directed things, and it's kind of interesting seeing certain examples of how he did it, because it was often through his connections with people, like just letters back and forth with other representatives in other colonies, and behind the scenes, planning with his party, the Whigs, and so forth, rather than trying to be some sort of figurehead. He looked at how things should be seen by others and thought of the consequences of what certain actions should lead to. It did, and it's kind of interesting in that while he was considered penniless, basically, a lot of people did know about the network he had formed, or at least his influence. So it's kind of a thing where they might think he has some sort of influence and might have a great vast network, he must be a wealthy merchant. It's no, it's Samuel Adams who is basically penniless. It's just kind of interesting, that thing is that there was a lot of focus placed on his influence by people at the time. But it's kind of interesting seeing how he set things up, because they knew what was going on and they knew he had the shrewdness to do what he did. But it's still interesting that while it was possible for him to kind of almost take the reins, he didn't, or would push someone else to, or say, hey, this person may want it for our colony, but we should have another colony take the lead, so it's not Boston and Massachusetts doing this for their own well-being and trying to rule over the United States and so forth, but rather having someone else take the lead. And so it's clear that Adams had a special gift for what he did. And yet, communication and community are just as important nowadays, if not even more. And the fact is that communication is so much easier these days, at least in regards to speed and direction. Now, actual communication might be hit or miss, but again, rather than waiting months for a response from another country, we can get one within minutes, if not seconds. So in a way, we can stay informed about events across the world, and even inform people we would have never met before about what we know. And that doesn't take a lot. I mean, just with a phone or a camera, you can share your stills with the world and your knowledge with the world. You can share what you see going on, what's happening around you, and give almost this boots on the ground view of what's actually going on, rather than, hey, you might be hearing this, but this is what I'm seeing. So it's interesting. But on the other hand, this ease of communication seems to have had almost this native effect on natural community. Because the average person back in those days would probably remain around the same certain areas for most of their life. Like, they might move from their hometown, but then they would basically stay wherever they moved. So they ended up being stuck with the people who were around them. And plus, with the speed of travel and this trade, they kind of had to remain on good terms with those people. They couldn't be making enemies of the major merchants in town and then hope to still get their supplies. I mean, maybe they would still be good business people, but again, and also merchants trying to be basically like treating the town badly or so forth, or starting the wrong goods, because then the town wouldn't buy them and they go out of business. And so the issue nowadays is that we get glued to our work or our goals or communication systems, and we're thinking about stuff afar off or in this location or this location, rather than actually being involved and communicating with the community around us. And I think Proverbs 27:10 actually does a very good job of summing this up with, thine own friend and thy father's friend forsake not. Neither go into thy brother's house in the day of thy calamity, for better is a neighbor that is near than a brother far off. I mean, in a time of trouble, do we want to have to wait for our family who's hundreds of miles away to possibly come and meet us, and they have to probably prepare for that trip? Or would it be better to have a neighbor come quickly to help us? And think about it, if we lost all the communication advances that we've had since the 1700s, it would probably take months to get to our family. So would most of us actually be able to work with our neighbors? Because it is interesting how truly fragile some of these advances we made are. And it's kind of something to really think about, that just makes you think of, hey, should I be doing something different? Or at least that's my thought on it. But still, and even then, there's still something about actually being present in community with others that is unlike anything else. And again, that's being present. It's not just knowing what's going on, because sometimes you can find the town gossip and know everything, but you may not actually be involved and actually influencing it and partaking with it and doing life with people. That's what I'm talking about, being present. And I will admit I'm still in the learning process in this, but I do feel it is essential, because it truly is something, because it is being a part of something that is greater than ourselves. Anyway, these are some of my thoughts on this, and as I've said, it's definitely biased. But in that case, why not let me know what you think about it in the comments below? And if you like this video, please like and subscribe because that does support the drill for this channel. And I'll talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.